Hey guys, and welcome back to the WODdoc. One of the things that we do today, we're trying to expand on our normal everyday videos, and I want to introduce to you guys Jason Moore from Elite HRV. Jason was nice enough to take some time out. I'm always trying to expand my own knowledge, so I ended up contacting Jason a while back and kind of went back and forth, and somehow we decided, or I should say I decided, I kind of talked him into it. I didn't think that the topic of HRV would be done diligently, or give enough respect to, if we just kind of jammed it into a 3-minute video consultation. So what I did is I set up a time with him, and hopefully, and he was nice enough to make it work for us. So we're going to talk about a couple things about HRV. A lot of people, it's kind of like one of those new edge things that I think is just on the brink of really helping all athletes in general. So without further ado, please, this is Jason Moore from Elite HRV, and we're going to start out with Jason. First of all, thank you so much for jumping onto the show. I really appreciate it, and it's an honor to have you on. I'm a big fan of all your stuff. I'm a big fan of you doing some groundbreaking stuff, kind of going outside the box that nobody else has kind of done, so thank you so much for that. If you could start out, could you tell me a little background about yourself and how you stumbled on HRV?
Sure. No, I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm glad to be here. So there wasn't too much arm twisting, so I appreciate it nonetheless. But yeah, so like you said, my name's Jason Moore. My background is actually, I have a heavy background in information systems, and I worked in the oil and gas industry, kind of building and designing complex information systems that were helping people get more out of the expensive machinery that was out in the field. And all during that time, I happened to be coaching CrossFit at my level 1 still, and then also some personal training, and just really starting to research a lot more into. I'm kind of a nerd for research, so one thing led to another. I started researching fatigue and recovery and kind of optimizing training stimulus and things like that, and that led me to heart rate variability. I noticed that at that time, heart rate variability was starting to become available for the first time to consumers at a little bit of a cheaper rate than it used to be, and I could talk more about that later. And so I started experimenting with it, and I forked out some of my own money to get one of the more expensive systems at the time. And then I started talking to doctors and started to talk to some coaches even that were a little bit more on the cutting edge, and seeing how they were using it. And then I started to realize, with my information systems background and my passion for this stuff, and so the connections that I had been building, that I could probably put together a package that would be useful to people. So that was several years ago, and Elite HRV was born almost as a side hobby there, and then it's grown into a thriving community that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, well, it's something else. That's for sure. It's definitely more than just a side hobby now, and I think it's given some great information. We could talk more about that, but obviously, so we keep on using the term HRV. Let's talk about what is HRV. Like, first of all, like, just pure Webster's dictionary type stuff, right?
Sure. So like you said, the definition, so to speak, of heart rate variability is the change in heart rate over time. And so that's the really basic definition. But really what you're looking at is when your heart beats, let's say 60 beats per minute, one might think that that's 1 beat per second. But really it's more like 0.9 millisecond, or 0.9 seconds, 1.1 seconds, 1.2 seconds. It fluctuates really small incrementals, or it fluctuates in really small numbers that we can't detect, but the latest technology, which it's not really new now, but heart rate monitors are able to detect those small changes and then report them back to a device, which then calculates what your heart rate variability is from those changes.
Right, so when we look down at our watch or anything like that, when we're looking and tracking heart rate, that's not actually what our heart rate is. That's actually an average of our heart rate, correct?
Correct.
Yeah,
That's
understood, yeah.
spot on. Yeah, a lot of people will say, oh, well, my watch says one thing, and heart rate variability is showing me something slightly different, it's because it's different.
Understood. Okay, so I guess that makes that really simple. I guess then, well, now that we know what that is, and I think that's a good definition, what is it exactly, like, what does heart rate have to do with like fatigue or neurologic fatigue? I hate to use this example, but it's prevalent in the CrossFit community. We have had tragedies and this and that, and we blame them kind of, or we have blamed them on neurologic fatigue. That tragedy that happened with Kevin Ogar back in the past. There was people on both ends. They said, this shouldn't have happened. It couldn't have been programming because his maximal lift was so much higher than the lift that he was attempting. And honestly, when you look back at it, I think it was just a tragic turn of events, obviously. But like neurologic fatigue got blamed a lot about that. It got thrown out there. It said, yeah, he may have been able to do those other lifts, but he was failing not because of muscular fatigue, but neurologic fatigue. And that was like one of the things that was one of the first times that I started to look into this idea of neurologic fatigue, because prior to that, even as a sports professional myself, I was just kind of like, listen, you're tired. But it turns out that that's not really true. Your muscles could be able to do something, but your neurology could be not able to do something, and vice versa, right?
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So let me kind of break that down.
Okay.
So heart rate variability, the deeper definition of it is, so like, what causes these little variable changes in our heart rate? So that's where we can start, is asking that question. And there's lots of things that influence the heart. The heart is connected to every single process in your body. Just from thinking a thought could change your heart rate, right? If you're nervous about something, or if you see a car coming, nothing's happened yet, but your heart rate starts elevating automatically. And so if you look a little bit deeper, there's two branches of your nervous system called the parasympathetic branch and the sympathetic branch. And those are branches of the autonomic nervous system. And those two branches are responsible for kind of on the one hand, preparing your body for action. That's the sympathetic branch. It's the fight or flight, typically referred to. And then on the other hand, the parasympathetic is that rest and digest. It's kind of repairing your body and making sure that it will perform better in the long run, hopefully. And so one of them is like short-term survival, sympathetic, and the other is long-term survival, rest and recovery and improvement. And so these two branches are actually interacting with your heart all the time, and they're both constantly pushing and pulling on your heart to speed up and slow down as in response to all the other stimuli and things that are going on, including digestion, fatigue, or whatever task that you have in front of you at the moment. And so that just kind of shows the integration of the nervous system in with the heart and what we're measuring with heart rate variability. Now, translating that back to your question about fatigue is that when you accumulate fatigue, you're basically accumulating stress, so to speak, on the body. And so what you would typically see is that when you're stressed, you have a lot of sympathetic nervous system activity. And then as that accumulates, you reach a point where your body basically crosses a threshold and can't perform very well unless it starts to get some additional recovery. And at that point, the parasympathetic nervous system needs to play a stronger role and really kick in and give you some recovery so that you don't burn yourself out over the long run. And this can happen in a single workout. It can happen, but more measurably and more likely so over a series of workouts over several days. And so I may have gone off the rails a little bit on what your question was. But.
I think that you kind of covered just a little bit. Like I said, so how exactly does it affect? How exactly does HRV, or should I say, what does HRV have to do with neurologic fatigue? And you said that as we continually work, we're actually accumulating stress, and then you could kind of jump on from there. But I guess, how is it that we'll then measure this HRV to say, okay, our nervous system is too stressed to perform what? I guess is what we're gonna. How is that gonna affect necessarily the ability to perform complex movements or any movements to be Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Yeah. Um, so basically, we recommend that you measure HRV on a regular basis every single day when you get up in the morning. And so the reason for this is that many
Hold on,
factors.
I don't want to like jump ahead, but I do
Yep.
want to get to that. But I want to talk about just like a little bit as what does the nervous system like? So looking at that nervous system, saying so we should have a high HRV, I believe, and I know I might be going ahead a little bit versus a low one. High versus low, I guess. Let's start there. What is the difference between having a good variability and a bad variability, and then how does that translate into knowing that we are neurologically fatigued or not? You know what I mean? And like, I guess this is a third portion of the question, and I might be screwing everything up here. Like I said, I'm not an expert
No.
by any means, but then knowing that if we know that we're neurologically fatigued, what in the world? Why do we care? Is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, I'll start there. So knowing that you're fatigued on a systemic level, it's different than local muscular fatigue, for example. So, like, if you did nothing but bicep curls, then your biceps, of course, would get a lot of work and they would be very fatigued. But neurologically, especially after you did that one or two times, you probably wouldn't be getting that much global stimulation of your body. And so you'd be essentially leaving a lot on the table because you could do a lot more work than just bicep curls and
Okay.
stimulate the whole body that way because you have the capacity to handle it. And on the other end, if you did something that's very globally activating, like snatching or clean and jerking or something like that, then you might be able to squat still a heavy weight, or you might be able to go do bicep curls with a heavy weight or whatever. But systemically, at the nervous system level, you're very fatigued, most likely, unless you are doing light those and you do Olympic lifts a lot. But then your injury potential goes way up when you're neurologically fatigued, and the ability to focus and do skills with the proper form and all that stuff becomes much more challenging. And you're basically taxing the whole system a lot more than those isolative exercises, and that leads to perhaps you would be underperforming on future exercises, or you risk injury on future exercises if you don't get the proper recovery in between those times.
Understood. So being neurologically fatigued is kind of, I mean, that could be traced all the way down to like the catalyst that actually happen in the neurologic system, right? You're, like we're talking about like actual. I mean, I don't want to go into whole like sodium release and calcium release and electrolytes and all this other stuff, but can't that be traced all the way down to that as well? Like literally, you don't have the the elements to produce a neurologic contraction, which is basically flipping on the switch to those muscles. Is that right or wrong, or am I way off
Uh,
track there?
no, I mean it's probably not that black and white, but it is making it more likely for that to happen. I mean, and when we talk about fatigue, if we just think about fatigue on a global level, and that fatigue is really just an accumulation of stress, and it could be from clean and jerks, or it could be from a long day at work, or a really terrible commute. So you can accumulate fatigue on a global level from other sources besides exercise too.
Right.
And mental fatigue. I mean, if you hate the workouts that you're doing, then that can definitely affect your injury potential and your fatigue on a systemic level. A lot of fatigue is actually the mental.
Right.
We have mental safe catches, if you will, that kick in usually before our physical limits.
Right.
But it's also easy to push past that, and that can happen easily in CrossFit too with the competitive nature of it. to push past your safety barriers that your mind puts in place.
Understood. So I mean, try to get a little on track, a little summary. So basically, I think the wrap up point is that neurologic fatigue doesn't have to come from physical stress. It can come from emotional and mental stress. That can also cause these fatigues, and then the emotional physical stress can definitely hamper or cause some type of effect onto your physical performance, which in that case, that's like where we can measure this through your heart rate variability. And how is your heart rate variability affected by neurologic stress, I guess, or neurologic fatigue? And kind of go from there as far as high versus low. And maybe I'm simplifying it too much, but there's this score, right? There's a magical score, and those numbers mean something. I'm still trying to figure them out, and that's kind of why we were originally having this conversation.
Yeah, no problem. I've gotten some emails from several CrossFit coaches that are doing really well with heart rate variability, but they also said it took them a while to kind of really figure out what the numbers are saying and wrap their mind around what's going on. And so
Yeah,
we're going to try to
absolutely,
do.
because that's one of the things I really love about your app, and we could talk about that a little bit later, is that you give raw data. And one of the things, there's other ones that are out there, Sweetbeat, and I think Bulletproof has one as well, but they kind of give like this, like, oh man, we're doing gnarly now, dude, and there's like these just make up these abstract names for whatever those calculations are. And the thing that I do like, as a scientific type guy, I like numbers. Even if they lie to me, I still want to know what they are, right? Even if I don't know what to do with them, I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. Give them to me anyway.
So basically, yeah. So we like to provide an easy indicator for the people who don't really care to get down into the nitty gritty, but then we also provide the raw data for people who like to do a little more. And some of our elite sports teams that are making use of it actually like to take that raw data and plug them into a whole bunch of other metrics that they're tracking. But because they're elite sports teams and they're operating under a 100% controlled environment, pretty much, they have the time to track a bunch of stuff. But anyways, coming back to heart rate variability score. So what is the score, right? And is higher always better? Is lower always worse? Actually, the answer is no. In general, a higher HRV score correlates with better aerobic fitness. It correlates with being younger. It correlates, so a lower biological age, so to speak. So in general, a higher HRV score is seen as better, but that's not always the case, which I'll come back to. And a lower HRV score is typically associated with aging. So the older you get, typically the lower your HRV score. Also lower aerobic fitness. So if you're just into powerlifting, for example, and you don't train aerobically very often, then you might be great at powerlifting, but on average have a lower HRV score than somebody who does CrossFit, for example. And then but then the thing about that score, though, is that it changes and fluctuates all the time. And so trying to nail down, it's kind of like when you take a blood test, depending on what you were doing that day or the day before, your blood test for nutrient deficiency could be different than on a blood test on another day. And so it's not to say blood tests are useless, it's just to say that one single test at one point in time can't necessarily tell you everything that you need to know with 100% accuracy about what's going on. And so that's why we recommend measuring HRV over time so that you can start to pick up on what is your baseline HRV, what is your average HRV over time, right? And that's more important than your HRV on any single day, or any period of time that you measure, and that's less than a day. So you want me to go into maybe why higher is not always better, or lower?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I really like the point that I want to make a point is that it's not just one time. So if people are going to go ahead and they're going to try this and try to make something useful out of it, it's just like anything else. Consistency normally gives you the best results with anything. If you want to be really good shoe shiner, you probably do that pretty often, and you're going to get the best results with it. So if we want to monitor and give ourselves some good information, let's just do it consistently to give ourselves an actual good picture. Then that way, when something becomes strikingly different, it has that much more value because if I don't know, let's just to give a raw number, if I had a score of 10 every single day for 6 months and then I woke up one day and had a score of 100, I might not know whether that's bad or good, but I could tell you there's something happens, right? Something's different.
Right.
Versus if I just did it once today and then I did it 6 months from now, what does that mean? There's no relevance to that information.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And that's actually what the beauty of some of the heart rate monitors and smartphones that we have access to now is that in the past, heart rate variability was measured with really expensive, super accurate ECG equipment that was in the tens of thousands or more dollars. And only really like top level programs or hospitals could afford the machinery. And then even still, they're not, unless you're seeing the person at the same time every day and every single day, then it's hard to get a really consistent measurement over time. They might have expensive machinery, but only be getting a reading once every 6 weeks. And like you said,
Yeah.
the relevancy is hard to target there. And so there it comes back to measuring every morning, is what we recommend. But yeah, basically that allows you to look at what's my average HRV over time, and then each day after that, how am I fluctuating from that average? So is my HRV significantly lower than my average today, or is my HRV significantly higher than my average today, and what does that mean? And we kind of help break that down.
Oh, awesome! I think that makes a lot of sense. This is just a side question. I know it's probably a little bit more than I originally thought of, but I wanted to bring it out because some of the other applications have that parasympathetic versus sympathetic, and like one becoming the prominent driving factor. And how does that affect our HRV? I know that's a little bit higher than we wanted to, but that means something too, right? I mean, I was talking to another coach that does a lot with HRV stuff, and he's like, oh well, so when my athletes are primarily sympathetic that day, I do this, but when they're parasympathetic, I do that, and that was a little bit above my understanding, so that was something I wanted to
Sure, yeah. So that kind of relates to, like, for example, you had a 10-day average HRV of 70, and today you took a reading and it jumped up to 75, which may be abnormal, right? Then that would indicate basically that you've got a lot of parasympathetic activity going on, and that your recovery systems are firing, and that could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing. On the flip side, you take a measurement, you're normally 70, and it drops down to 60, 65, something like that. That indicates that you've got a lot of sympathetic activity going on. You're possibly sympathetic dominant that day. And so we kind of give a gauge in the app that just shows you which side of the nervous system is a little bit more dominant that day. And so, yeah, like what your coach was saying, when you're very sympathetic dominant, that means your body's under stress already. And so going into training, you know that your body's already in a somewhat stressed out state. And so you can use that to tailor the training a little bit to make sure that either you don't injure yourself or you get the most out of the training session that you can without pushing the limit.
Understood. I think that's a great parallel to the question that we kind of been avoiding just a little bit. And that's like, how does HRV have anything to do, or how does monitoring HRV, how can it improve our training? When we spoke, we talked about a little bit about you kind of developed these like red, yellow, green plans and implemented them into your box. I would like you just to explain just a little bit about A, how could it help us, and B, what was your like little idea, because it's genius in my mind.
Yeah, I mean, the goal for moving forward is to make this as easy as possible. But basically, depending on how far you deviate from your average HRV each day, so let me just make sure that everybody understands, because I've done a presentations at gyms where I keep talking about this daily reading, and then people are like, well, what is that? What are you actually what are you
Okay, yeah,
doing?
that's yeah. What is the daily reading? All right.
And
So,
so
so we have HRV. We defined what it is, but how exactly are we measuring this? I guess is it? Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, no problem. And it's just because I'd given the presentation half a dozen times. Yeah, there you go.
I got
And
mine right here. See, it never leave home without it. I actually travel with this thing too.
yeah, I travel. I'm even
I
more
guess
nerdy. I
I.
have extra batteries with mine.
Oh man.
But so basically, what you're doing, yeah, is you've got a smartphone or a tablet or something that runs iOS or Android and has Bluetooth 4.0 or above. You get a heart rate monitor that's a chest strap, like a Polar H7, or there's a couple recommended ones on our website if you want to look at different ones.
But
But
the wrist straps don't work, right? The ones.
correct. Yeah, wrist straps currently aren't accurate enough to measure that time between each beat, which is, I wish they were, because, yeah, they're a lot easier than the chest straps. But I have to unfortunately tell people it's just a limitation of the hardware right now. Similar with like putting your finger over the camera if you have one of those on your phone, or there's a lot of different methods to measure heart rate, but they're just not quite accurate enough for heart rate variability. So you wake up in the morning, first thing, you can do whatever you need to, use the restroom, drink a sip of water, whatever you want to do. Strap on that heart rate monitor, get it wet so you get some good electrical conductivity, and then you take a 2.5 minute reading, and then you're done. Okay,
Okay.
so that's each morning when you get up. Take the reading, you're done. It gives you an indication, which is what you were just talking about, of how ready you are to handle today's activities, whether that be going on a podcast or doing a CrossFit WOD. And
How
so it
was your
gives you
HRV this morning? Was it all right?
yeah, it was all right. It was a little lower than I'd hoped, but I pushed through it. So, and I could talk about why later. Um, so it gives you an indication, green, yellow, or red. Basically, green being you're good to go compared to your normal average. That doesn't mean if you can only squat 200, you should try 500 today. It just means that today's a good day to try to, give it
Wake
your
up,
all
look in the
within.
morning. Hey, everybody, come see how good I look. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. We've had some tweets actually, people tweeting, "Okay, it's Green Day. I'm ready to hit it hard" and stuff like that, which is awesome to see. And
Yeah.
then yellow is basically kind of just saying, "Hey, you're possibly under a little bit of stress today already, right when you wake up. So you might want to prioritize recovery, or maybe tailor the WOD a little bit, scale the WOD a little bit based on that, or." In the yellow zone, you could choose to push through it depending on what kind of rest days you have coming up. And then in the red is like you've accumulated a lot of fatigue. You've usually either sunk really low or you've had a spike up, which indicates, whoa, your body is, recovery systems are firing on all cylinders. And so you might want to be really careful, including a high intensity workout that day, or doing anything that involves a lot of skill.
Now that doesn't mean that you can't, correct? That's one of
Correct.
the things that we talked about when I was talking to the other coaches. Is some people they get very addicted to these numbers, and just like anything, I think ideas start out great, and then certain people get very what's that, like type A personality towards them, right? Where it's like, oh, but I'm off by 1 point. That doesn't mean that, like, listen, you don't like close the door, lock it, double bolt it because you're in the red that day, right? I mean, you can
Right.
still breathe and walk around.
Oh yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't mean. Yeah, exactly that. It does mean walking around actually would be a good activity, but
No, I just mean because there's certain people that when they were coaching them, they would start getting addicted to these numbers. Be like, I can't do it today. I'm in the red. I can't.
no,
But
yeah, and so that's
they use it as
actually
a crutch.
a great point. And so one thing is, an app will never replace a good coach,
Right.
right? And so if you're a recreational athlete and you're not training for a competition of any sort, then I would say go by the color indicators all the time, and that's especially if you're not working with a coach. Most CrossFitters are lucky enough to have a good coach nearby who they can show their reading to, and then coach can actually tailor the workout of the day to still get in some activity, but not push beyond the individual's threshold. And so that's where, kind of coming back to what you were saying earlier, I'm wanting to make it very easy for broad use of this for CrossFit, is that essentially you could have, and this is the first time I guess I'm publicly announcing
Oh,
this.
is that
So
was I supposed to keep that under wraps?
no,
I'm
no,
sorry.
no, it's totally cool. No, that's awesome. I mean, we're gonna have it up on the website not too long, anyways. But essentially, you could tailor the WOD each day and post a green, yellow, and red WOD each day. And so, essentially, the best way, or at least in my recommendation, is usually to cut the volume first, because since CrossFit is inherently a globally stimulating workout, that higher volumes typically induce a lot more stress than lower volumes. So cutting the volume first. So you could have a green workout, which is just normal, and then a yellow one, which is basically maybe half volume, right? And then a red workout of the day, which would be to maybe work on mobility, do some light skill work, or go to the WODdoc library and go through a bunch of WODdoc videos. No,
Shameless plug. I
seriously.
loved it.
Yeah, no, I'm serious. That is, some people actually don't get, I'm sure you've said this before in plenty of your videos, that prioritizing correcting form and doing corrective exercise and actually focusing on mobility when you need to, it's hard to do for hard charging athletes because they just want to do all the hard stuff.
Gosh, we talk about that all the time. It's a total different topic, but the fact that like when people, if you just look at the effort level that you give when you're trying to take care of your body, like saying either mobility, skill work, or stability work, versus when they're working out, like like you look at somebody and they're rolling on a foam roller and they're talking about the date they had the night before, but when they're doing their WOD, they're like they can't move, and like they're in total focus, total concentration, hanging on, giving maximal effort at that workout, but they give minimal effort at actually taking care of their body. And it's just as important. It's actually part of that training. People that train and that are very good, like people like good coaches and stuff, they make the recovery portion just as difficult, and you put just as much effort into recovering as you do working out, because it's just it's like sleeping and walking, or sleeping and being awake. I mean, you have to do both, and if you don't do both of them, the other one will be affected.
Yep.
If that made any sense. I think it did, kind of. Maybe sleeping and
Yeah.
walking didn't mean any sense at all, but definitely
So
recovery and training go hand in hand.
No, I agree 100%. In fact, you should probably be doing way more recovering than training on average.
Right,
And so,
especially for the less elite athletes. Elite athletes, they have, like you said, a 100% controllable environment. Like I think it's funny when anybody ever says, "Oh, well, Derek Jeter, he sprained his ankle. He's back in 2 weeks." I said, "Yeah, exactly, because he got to spend 10 hours a day rehabilitating that. For 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. I'm sure if we had those controlled environments for yourself, we could probably get you back a lot quicker too." But
oh yeah, and you guarantee he wasn't commuting to work each day or sitting in an office chair or
right.
doing any of that. So, I mean, even elite athletes. Michael Phelps, even if he swam for 10 hours a day, every single day, for example, he'd still be recovering more than working out, because the other 14 hours of the day he's recovering, right? And so if you think about that, recovery should always be probably the main activity going on, and we're doing this acute stimulus when we work out. And this kind of helps, that's all just general recovery. Having a red day or several yellow days in a row can help you actually prioritize doing some more active recovery things, which is where you come in, and giving people actually, besides just resting, things that they can do to not only recover but improve for the next workout. And so that kind of builds itself in if you're measuring each day, and then you're not wasting a day when you could be doing something harder, essentially. I mean, it's not a waste, but
Right.
and
I got you. So basically, what we said then is if we're going ahead and we're going to track this, and we have a great day. If we have a green day, that means that everything is kind of all systems go. We would just kind of do our regular whatever workout that WOD of the day or whatever our programming is. If we had a yellow day, we just want to be cautious about it. We might want to alter things. Maybe make if we had full snatches, we could probably still do other things, but maybe bring down, if not the intensity of it, or well, we could try to alter the intensity, but also the complexity of the movement. So maybe if we had snatches that day, we could maybe move it to overhead squats and snatch pulls. Like you're still encompassing a lot of the same
yep.
musculature, but you're leaving out some of that complexity, some of that a coordination, I guess, that possibly could get us in trouble there. And then if we had a red day, that's kind of like, okay, well, listen, we really need to kind of cool it out a little bit. I recently just had a red day. I had a crazy thing. I missed my flight for what I was teaching. I had to drive 11 hours down south, and then I taught all day that day.
Wow.
If there was something below a red, like black, like little death with skulls and stuff, I probably had that day. It was pretty crazy.
That's
But
a great example, though, of how if you're measuring on a daily basis, and some people only measure when they work out, for example, which would be maybe like 3 times a week for some people, you're missing a lot of data because you could have had something like that where you drove all day and had to give a presentation, and it was stressful, and a lot of other things were going on, and that gave you a red the next day, and it definitely would have affected your performance that day. If you were trying to do like a max effort Olympic lift, that might have been a really bad idea.
yeah,
And so
walking and chewing gum at that time was probably a bad idea. So I think that all makes sense. So why don't you tell me then a little bit about what Elite HRV is? I mean, I got you on because that's obviously how I got contacted with you is through this app. And so tell me just a little bit about HRV. Like, what exactly does it do? We know what HRV is now. We know how it could possibly affect our performance. We know that we think that we should monitor it, and if we do monitor it, these are the benefits that we can get from it. It could control our workouts, or at least give us information to better guide our workouts. So tell me, how does Elite HRV kind of help with that as well?
yeah, sure. So you get as a consumer, as an individual, you can start measuring for free as long as you have the chest strap. And you'll start getting those green, yellow, red recommendations, and you can actually start seeing your trends over time. Like, am I trending downward? Am I trending upward? Which kind of correlates with aerobic fitness levels and overtraining. If you're trending downward, then most likely you're overtraining or under recovering. And I have some like graphs and things I normally use at my gym presentations, but I can maybe just email you some pictures of those or something.
That'd be great.
And
Yeah.
so yeah, it looks at when you're undertraining or overtraining, you can start to see some of those trends. And then for a box or a team, which we have a lot of sports teams that have picked it up, and several CrossFit boxes as well. Basically, everybody can just take their reading on their own at home, and then as soon as they hit sync, as long as they're linked up with their box, which we call it a team, basically, as long as they're linked up with the team, then immediately, instantly, coach receives the indication for each person. And so you can separate people out into green, yellow, red groups, basically automatically. And then you could write a WOD for each group if you want to do that. Or you've noticed that their trend is going down, you could give them some personal attention. It's just kind of
Yeah, no, I think that's really great, especially for even if it's not box owners, if it's personal trainers or anything else like that. Anybody that's working in the functional fitness world, if they have a bunch of people, because a lot of people will lie to you, right? They're like, oh, hey, no, I feel great today. And are they able to see their score before it goes to you, or does it just get shot to you automatically?
That's there. It can be both, and so actually we have a setting for example, if personal trainer, or actually a lot of our sports teams like this setting too. We call it the non-self-fulfilling prophecy setting. And it's a little wordy, but basically they don't want their athlete to wake up and look at a red or most likely a yellow and then come in like basically already checked out
Yeah.
and say like I'm not going to try hard because I got a yellow today. And so we have the option for teams to be able to hide it for 24 hours, for example, and then the coach can see it, but the user can't until the following day. So the day has already been tailored by the coach.
Right.
And yeah, so anybody that wants to, the big benefit is anybody that works with more than one person, which is almost every coach, and wants to individually tailor each person's stimulus to get the most out of that person could benefit from just linking up and being able to see that HRV score every day. And you could track other things with it if you want. But
definitely, knowledge is power, and we can only help ourselves with knowledge. I'm a huge believer in that. So basically, there's two options. We have an option in which you just use independently as the user, and then there's an option in which you can use with your coach team, right, where it kind of goes right to them. And I really like that option because, especially like I said, I mean, everybody always like, oh no, everything's fine. But if you already have that score, you have that information. That's your job to be able to tailor them based on the information that you receive. And it's not objective information is awesome because people can't fake objective information. We can, pain that's subjective. What might be a 2 to me might be a 10 to somebody else, or vice versa. But 2 plus 2 is always 4. So
right.
I think that's really cool. So awesome. I guess is there anything else that you want to elaborate on what I said from right there or anything like that?
Oh no, I mean, if anyone has any questions, I'll tell my contact info at the end because
the last
this
thing
can
I
go
want
down
to ask,
a
right,
million
a
routes.
million different ways. Last thing I want to say is, how do we find Elite HRV? It's obviously an application so we can get it at the App Store for iPhone and Android.
iPhone, Android, iPad, the Galaxy tablet, or whatever. Yeah.
Anything that's electronical, it magically goes there, right?
Almost. We're still working on Windows, folks, but
oh man. Okay, well I feel bad for people with Windows, but anyway, so Elite HRV, that's ELITE HRV as in HR and V. I'm not sure why I said it like that, but you got it. So my last kind of thing is, how can we find additional info about HRV, like credible sources, information about yourself, and more information about Elite HRV as the company?
Yeah, definitely. So obviously you can go to our website or download the app. There's some info in there, but really there's a blog I'd like to highlight, which I have no real affiliation with at this time, but Andrew Flatt. He writes a blog at hrvtraining.com. And he's an HRV researcher and researches other things too. But he really does take an objective look at it and looks at both sides of the picture. And even though he emphasizes heart rate variability in his research, he does a really good job of looking at when is it not applicable or when is it applicable, that type of stuff, which I really like that objectivity in his research. So he's a great resource, especially for athletes.
Awesome.
There's not a lot of comprehensive spots like that have information on heart rate variability because previously it was more used in like medical fields and things like that. And so you can go to like PubMed if you like to look at research studies. There's tons on heart rate variability. So you can kind of piece things together. That's one of the things that we're going to try to do better in the future is provide more educational content. I've got so many coaches and even doctors and people that are using it and communicating with me on a regular basis that I'm going to start trying to take those people's stories and applications and experience and putting them out there. And I think, we'll see if this is the official announcement or not, but I think we're going to make that into a podcast as well that kind of helps connect our users or anybody interested in learning more about biofeedback and heart rate variability with people who are using it on the front lines on a daily basis. And so
that's awesome. All right, so I'm just gonna wrap this up. I really do appreciate you coming out, and you've been an awesome resource to myself. I hope this exposure gives you a lot more exposure as well, and just lets people know, because I really do believe that this is some of the future of training. We measure and do so many metrics for so many different things. I can't imagine that we don't start doing this. If that information is there, why not use it for what it could be used for? Folks, this is Jason Moore one more time, Elite HRV. I really do appreciate you coming out for today, and I can't thank you guys enough, or thank you enough, right?
Hey, no, pleasure's all mine. I appreciate the invite. So I hope everybody learned something.
Okay, awesome. So I'm definitely gonna contact you a little bit later on, and hopefully we can get like a little bit of a follow-up stuff, some questions that come in to me. I'll make sure that I write them down. So everybody out there that has any questions, please send them to me. I'll kind of try to organize them. Maybe we'll do like a little follow-up in 6-8 weeks or whenever you have time. I know you're a busy man.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's I travel a lot, but I'm more than happy to take the time, and I definitely kind of ramble too. So
Yeah,
if anyone
I go
has
all
any,
over. That's why I said we definitely need to be able to do a wrap up again. My tangents, I get like they go all over the place. So, and
perfect.
and please, this is an open invitation online. Or if you're ever in the East Coast, make sure that you contact me. We can get out and at least do something fun, educational and fun at the same time.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll do.
All right, Jason, thank you so much. I will. I'll talk to you again soon.
Alrighty, appreciate it.
Be good now.